Hey, good morning. Hi, everybody. It is Monday morning, and we are here live to Christina to join me. Hi, Josephine. Good morning. Hey,
Hi,
happy Monday,
everybody.
Christina.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to Monday Tech Tip Talk. Christina and I are knitting tech editors. And every Monday morning, we get together and chat about technical issues to help you guys with your knitwear design, maybe your tech editing. And also, we like to we're at home, so we thought we would offer our skills and knowledge to you guys during this time of quarantine for us. So today, Christina, we are starting a new topic.
So, for the next several weeks, we're going to talk about sweater patterns and sweater designing. And, because it's a whole different sort of ball game all by itself. It's so important that those patterns be correct and be edited. So, we are going to talk about that. And today, we wanted to share resources with you that we use and have and recommend for sweater designing. If you have questions about sweater design or things that trip you up about it, send one of us a message or put it in the comments when we share the post about going live and let us know what your questions are, and we'll be able to answer them in the coming weeks.
So we also did get some great questions this week, which we'll answer later on. Um,
Yes, we did.
but first, we want to talk about why sweaters are so tricky. Sweaters are like the ultimate in knitwear design because you are making a fabric, you're custom making a fabric to fit a body. And so there can be lots of different places in the pattern that can be room for error or cause trouble because it has to fit well.
Well, and it has
Um,
to fit. I mean, think about it, right? It has to fit bodies in several different places. There are many points that have to
mhm,
fit properly, that they're not the same, that don't change the same way in every body size. So
that's
it's
right.
really tricky. There's a lot of ways to make mistakes, and it's a tricky thing to hit all those points correctly. And really, there's room for error because of all of that, and there's also room for error because most sweater patterns are written for many sizes, and so that's really every single size is a separate pattern that has to be checked and has
hmm
to be right. Yeah, it's really important that those be correct and be checked.
So we are tech editors, so we highly recommend that you don't just get a sweater pattern tested, but you also hire a tech editor to check everything just to make sure that your grading is correct, your pattern writing is correct, and that it will actually fit the bodies that you intend it to fit. So when you are starting to write a sweater design, you may write it for your own body because you're the person who's modeling it, or you may write it for a sample size if you're writing it for a magazine. Um, and then you will grade it out into different sizes. This week, we're not going to talk about sizing a lot. Next week, we will talk in depth about size charts and sizing and get you started on that. But first, we're going to introduce some resources to you that we like, that we use in our tech editing, and we're going to answer some questions. So what should we start with first, Christina? What do you think? Ta-ta! Oh, so this is Maggie Righetti's sweater design for.
Sweater design in plain English, and it's an older book, but
Mhm. This book is really excellent. She's her language is a little old-fashioned, but she introduces a lot of excellent ideas as far as designing sweaters. Um, I think she's the first person to talk about a compound raglan. Compound raglan is where it is not a straight bias line from the neckline to the armhole, but it goes on a slight curve to match the body's curves. So it curves
She
out like
talks a
this
lot
and then
about
that.
she talks a lot about measurements too, and how to take them and what exactly. I think people have a lot of confusion about that.
Mhm.
I
Yep,
think that
I
can
do.
often be what the mistakes are sometimes in patterns, is exactly what these measurements are and what we mean by those measurements and how you achieve them. So there's a lot of information about that in here too that I really like.
And
And
because this is an older,
there's a lot of math too in here to help you figure out how to achieve those things.
and because it's an older book, you should be able to find it relatively inexpensively through a used bookstore online. It shouldn't be hard to find at all.
And she does talk about different types of construction, like Sarah was saying, of sweaters. It's a good one.
What's your next one, Christina? Oh yeah,
Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater Book. This
this
is
one came
another
out
one that
recently.
has good math. This is a newish book.
Hmm. And she goes into detail in this book with all of the construction math, with drawings, like
Yeah.
how to do the math for a set-in sleeve, how to do the guidelines for yoke sweaters, for raglan construction. All of the math related to it is in this book, and she has some really good patterns too. Amy Herzog is kind of a guru for fit. So if you're
I
looking
look in this book
for,
I look in this book for the neck too. She talks about how to achieve certain neck shaping and how to make
mhm,
sure that you get that right. I find
mhm,
I remember finding really helpful what she said about that in here that I didn't see somewhere else.
yeah, this is an
And talks
excellent
about how to make
resource.
adjustments, and yeah, it really is.
Hmm.
I interrupted you though.
All
I'm
right.
sorry, Sarah. What were you saying?
No, I'm saying it's an excellent resource because it has stuff in detail and it's most updated information. So a lot of times
Right.
in the sweater resource department, things are always being invented and honed a little bit. And this is the most recent sweater book available for design. Which next one?
Which I don't
Yay.
necessarily.
Oh, the
Yeah.
top down? Yeah.
Ann Bud's top
Should I
down
say what I
sweater book.
should I say
I think you
what I
should.
said yesterday
I
about
think
this?
what you want to say you should talk about. I do. I think you should,
Oh,
because
by the way, everyone.
really this book really is like a roadmap, right? And it really is a map of sweaters, and the numbers are right there for you in charts and all that stuff. And so you need to be careful.
So this book in particular is really interesting because basically it's formulaic. So you take your gauge that you get, and all the numbers are there for you to knit the designs according to your gauge, and you just find them in the chart. The thing about this is I've heard that some people use this to design their own sweaters. So they pull the numbers from the sizes and then use that to make their own patterns. And my personal opinion is that's violating some copyright. The this is her pattern in her book, so I think it's not great ethics to pull another designer's pattern and use their numbers for your own design. I think it's better if you do your own work. However, this book is incredibly useful to get a general idea of how things should work. And also, if you're a knitter, it's extremely useful if you just generally need a book with all kinds of different patterns in it and you don't want to buy individual patterns, but you want patterns to try out all the different methods using your own gauge. So I think those are my thoughts on
Yeah.
that one.
So
Hey,
it's
if
a
you
really
guys,
valuable book, but there is that cautionary tale about it.
yeah, there is a cautionary tale with that. Be careful how you use these resources. Make sure that you're not plagiarizing.
Right.
And if you guys have questions or comments about all the stuff that we're showing today, and we're talking about, please throw it into the comments down below and we'll respond. We love seeing you all here. What's the next
So
book?
in the top down vein, Elizabeth Doherty.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, this one is relatively new also, and was an improvement on an idea that had came a long time ago in this one, which is Barbara Walker's Knitting from the
Right.
Top.
I've got that up here too. I didn't pull that one
Yes.
out. Sorry.
So this one came out in the 80s. I should
I
look at the
think the 80s,
copyright.
I think. Isn't it the
Um,
80s?
no, 1972, which was the year I was born. So now you know how old I am. um, this book kind of revolutionized how people thought about seamless design. Before, a lot of seamless design was according to Elizabeth Zimmerman, which was from the hem up to the armholes and then to the neckline. This one is from the top, reversing everything. But there were some issues related to the armholes with her seamless construction of a set-in sleeve. So there was a lot of extra fabric at the underarm. There was an extra row at the front. So, or yeah, when you pick up the stitches around the armhole. So then Elizabeth Doherty came up with this other book, which is an improvement on this top-down seamless design. And this book, of course, everything's backwards, but Elizabeth Doherty's book kind of invented, took it a step further to deal with some of those other issues. Picking up the sleeve cap from the top down according to certain percentages,
Yes, so she
instead of
breaks
just
the sleeve
all
cap
equally.
up. Yeah, she breaks the sleeve cap up into sections,
Mm-hmm.
so that the way you build it is very specific. Yeah.
Yep.
And she also talks about one of the questions that we got, which is fitting the shoulders properly in the first place.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. So the the position of that sleeve line is very nice on these sweaters. The sleeve
right.
seam, quote unquote. So one of the questions that we got that we'll address right now is about, okay, now everything's closed up on my thing.
There were
Um,
a few people. Oh, do you have them right there?
yeah, let me see if I can find it here. Oh, I loved the Craftery Collective asked this question and said, I'd love to learn more about shoulder fit. I have several hand knits that fall off the shoulders, and I'm not sure what about the construction causes that to happen. You want to start, Christina?
Sure. I think there are a couple things because this does happen, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be as simple as it's the yarn you chose. A super wash yarn on a long sweater is going to be heavy and it's going to stretch. So that's not going to happen in a loftier yarn. So sometimes that can be what the problem is. But when you're talking about the fit being wrong and the shoulders falling off, it's often because in this industry, like we size everything to our bust. And in trying to achieve that bust and bicep measurement, we're not fitting the shoulders, which needs to be guided by the upper bust measurement and the cross back of the points between your shoulder and shoulder where you want that shoulder seam to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's not happening a lot, that's being neglected. And so we're sometimes knitting the wrong size, or adjustments aren't made in the pattern to allow for this bust, but this upper bust and this shoulder fit. And Sarah had something to say about that regarding the neckline and how the neck can
Right.
affect the shoulders not fitting.
So if you look at how a sweater fits at the neck in a sample size, you may have like a 7 or 7.5 inch back width neckline in the sample size, which might be at the lower end. Or it might be a smaller size. It might not even be in the middle. And then a lot of times designers will misgrade this and add a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch or even an inch across for each size. So by the time it gets to the largest size, even if it gets up to like 44 or 54, by the time it gets out here, it's beyond sometimes the shoulder width. So this part of the body is where our sweaters hang from. Our sweaters do not hang from our boobs. So it's a mistake to grade this part incorrectly. The distance between the neckline opening and the high point shoulder, which is right here, should be about the same for most of the sizes. And I mean, it can gradually get bigger by like maybe an eighth of an inch, but not a huge amount. So then the wider
Right.
the neckline is, the less fabric you have on your shoulders. So this is where all of your sweater is hanging from. The less fabric you have here, guess what's going to happen? It's going to slide. So I have seen sweaters that were designed with a large, a broad neck, front neck band, and a tiny, tiny shoulder width, like tiny, like an inch. And that's not enough fabric to keep it stable in place. So when you're designing a sweater, you have to look at your size chart at those points that Christina mentioned, the cross front, cross back, and even the back neck width or even the neck circumference and neck girth. And really look at the difference in your size chart between
Right.
those points.
Right. The
Like, so
ratio
if it's,
between points. Yeah.
so like if you're
Because
looking
it's
at
not
size
like people
40,
think that it's just all the points change in the same amount
same way.
all the way
That's
all over the
right.
body. It doesn't work that way. And in neglecting these measurements we're talking about is how you end up with poor shoulder fit.
Yeah, exactly. And some designs do lend more to poor shoulder fit. So sometimes the yoked sweaters can slide just because they're slanted. It's a circle that's going this way. Raglans can too. In a back neck version, the back neck width of a raglan is incredibly important because when you're building a sweater forward from this for a neckline opening, this back neck is where the sweater is going to fit here. So that's a general uh, description of why there probably is a problem. Some designs may have more problems than others. So hopefully that answered some questions. Um,
We have a comment, Sarah.
yeah, go ahead.
One woman said that she did that in a test knit and she could have knit a size smaller. Um,
Yeah.
and someone else said it makes total sense. I've also had cardigans with no buttons that fit and also fall
Mm-hmm.
off shoulders. One that fit had short rows sleeve cap, and the one that fell off did not have the short row cap. Does the
Yeah.
short row cap make a difference?
Um,
Honestly, it can make a difference in how the it fits, but if it's in the wrong place in the first place, then
mhm.
it's not going to matter how you've built the sleeve cap if your shoulder is
Right.
in the wrong place in the first place. Like if the shoulder is
If your
too
shoulder
far down
seam is
here,
way down here, the short row sleeve cap is not on this curvy part. The short
right?
row sleeve cap should be on this curvy part to make
Which is why it's
a
short rows to allow for that,
wedge,
right?
hmm to add that wedge there. So a traditional set-in sleeve has the shaping, has the extra depth in a sleeve cap form of the top of the sleeve if it's knit flat to go over that curve of your shoulder. So if there's two issues, if your shoulder seam is not here but it's farther down, then there's no curve to go over. And you have to have enough fabric to curve over that shoulder point. So I think we had another question too about a book. Somebody asked if there is a bottom up sweater design book. And I think that
Well, there
anything
are
by
books
Elizabeth
that talk
Zimmerman,
about anything by Elizabeth Zimmerman. She talks a lot about that. And honestly, what I like
all the
about
different constructions.
yeah, and what I like about her books talking about the bottom up is that it's kind of like a it's like anybody can do it. I mean, the way she explains it and
Yes.
the percentages and ratios she gives on how to know how many stitches and how to get the right fit and what you need for this part based
Mm-hmm.
on what you have for this part. It's really helpful how she describes it. And she talks a lot
Mm-hmm.
about bottom up stuff. Also, all the books we mentioned, except for obviously the specific top down books, do a dress
Hmm.
bottom up. Um, like
Right.
the Shirley Payton is the next one I had here, and
Okay.
she talks
Yeah,
about,
Shirley Payton.
different kinds. I love this book. So this is
Yes.
the sweater knitwear design workshop, and she talks about different types of sweater construction, and of course there are patterns in here also that are beautiful. But and she talks about different types of sleeves and how to design these different types of sweater constructions.
Hmm.
Oh, Josephine says
Shirley
that Amy
Payton
Herzog's
is,
book is all seamed bottom up.
it is, except for the yolks.
Um, for a drop shoulder design, should the sleeve opening measurement be for the shoulder or the upper arm?
Uh, it depends
The
on the
drop
design.
shoulder usually comes much lower, so you need to
Hmm.
fit the drop shoulder to the bicep measurement.
But depending on the design, there may be a lot of ease there for the bicep, or there may be none, or there may be negative ease
Well,
if people are
right, but you
doing
have to
a drop
factor in the
shoulder
kind
and
of
then
ease that you want.
you have to
Yeah,
factor
you
in
have
the
to figure in
design
the kind
ease.
of ease that you want. But you're
Hmm.
basing it on, that the
Yeah,
bicep measurement, not like
right.
the armhole depth, but the bicep.
So Julie also suggested Catherine Lowe's book, which is The Raveled Sleeve, I think. Uh, Julie, let me know if that's the book that you're referring to. Has excellent suggestions on making better fitting
Suggestions on
shoulders.
making
I
better
can't
fitting shoulders.
find it anymore. It's
Yeah,
one
I
of
don't
those
have that.
books that, oh, there it is. You can still get it on Lulu. And Catherine Lowe uses a couture techniques to produce really fine hand knits. But back to Shirley Payton. This is kind of like my Bible. I refer to this all the time. She
Mm.
discusses in depth all the different constructions with very, very, very detailed, and this is my dream dress, all the detailed measurements, shaping. She even draws the shaping out for you with charts and gives you all the formulas for it. This is a true knit design workshop. If you worked through this, you would be getting a huge education into structure of hand knits and how to shape things using math, which is what tech editors do, is we check all the math. Um, she also
Yeah.
has a really good size charts in the back and
Yeah, there
gives
are
you
size charts
design
in the back,
process
and
checklists.
they are pretty good.
So that's definitely one book that I keep out all the time. Mine is kind of dog-eared. I'm glad
Yeah,
it's
mine's kind
not
of, yeah.
paperback. Get the
Oh,
hardbound
Shirley
version.
Payton. Shirley
Hmm.
Payton. The book is Knitwear Design Workshop, a comprehensive guide to hand knits. Shirley Payton.
Paden, and she is on Instagram. I think she's just about ready to release another book, which is pretty fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Did you have another book, Christina?
The last one I took out was just the Vogue knitting, ultimate knitting book.
Yes!
So there are,
Yay!
so like there are,
There's a whole section.
yeah, there are a lot of these types of books, right, that are comprehensive knitting books, like the Principles of Knitting and,
Hmm.
the Knowledgeable Knitter
Hmm.
and, all the, and
Right,
books like that sort of cover everything, right? But
right.
this one in particular is organized really well, and it has a lot of good information for sweaters.
Yes.
So
This is my
what did you
favorite
want to say
page,
about
is
that book?
all, this is my favorite page. It's all of the collars and how all the math behind it. I love it, and I refer to it all the time when I'm checking a particular style of a neckline. They have a whole, it's like a 78-page section in here on designing sweaters with a
Yeah.
lot of information on how to do it. So this is useful for the general reference for knitting, but also for designing socks, mittens, other accessories such as shawls and sweaters. I highly recommend if you can get a hold of a copy of this. It's worth the
Yeah, I
expense.
mean, it depends. Like she just said, whatever you're designing, there's a good chunk of information
Hmm.
about designing all sorts of things, not just
Hmm.
sweaters. It's a pretty good book to have. I'm happy I have it.
So
And
the
that was one
other,
of my,
one of the other, sorry?
nope, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one of the other questions that we got was before becoming a tech editor, what sources or books are necessary to study? And we covered this a little bit in the previous weeks, just to touch on it because we just talked about the Vogue knitting book. You need to study in depth whatever you want to edit, right?
Mm,
So
you
if
really
you want
do.
to be a sock editor, you should get all the sock books that are highly recommended by other people. Study sock techniques, heels types, top down, toe up, and then
You know,
just
if you
go
want to
really
edit
deep.
shawls, there's so many different ways to design shawls. You need to learn about that. I would
Hmm.
really suggest what she said, get books. And you don't have to go crazy like buying things. So many of these you can get at the library. I know
Hmm.
we can't go to the library right now, but um, a lot of them are ebooks too. And you can learn as much as you can about the types of things you want to edit. Also, this is a good jumping off point. I know we've talked about this book a lot, but Kate Atherley's Beginner's Guide to Writing Knitting Patterns is a really good one to
Hmm.
have as a guide to just sort of learning about style in knitting patterns and how that affects the pattern. That's what I would suggest.
So hopefully, yeah, hopefully, Nikki, that answers your question. Go deep into the area that you want to be known for as an editor. Christy and I love sweaters, so that's why we're focusing a lot of our resources on that, because we really enjoy editing sweaters. Um, So if you guys have any questions for us about these resources or any other questions for our future talks about sweaters in the coming weeks, throw them into the comments. I'm going to show you a couple more books that are a little bit older. Maybe this one is out of print, but it's worthwhile if you can find a copy of it and you really want to take apart sweater construction, look up this one. This is an old interweave book by Carmen Mickelson and Mary Ann Davis, and it's the Knitter's Guide to Sweater Design. This book is fantastic in that everything is done with charts. And not only does it take apart the math of like an alternate set in sleeve, but they have all of the drawings for everything. So it's very, very visual as far as, say, for instance, different sleeve caps and why they fit the way they do. Um,
Right.
so if you have a way to get a hold, I wish Interweave would republish this book, but I don't know if that will ever happen with what's going on. This is one of my favorite resources to refer to as far as getting educated about the math behind sweater construction and what works and doesn't work. The other one that I would recommend, if you are interested in sweaters that are traditionally shaped, is Knitting in the Old Way by Priscilla A. Gibson Roberts. And this book you have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt as far as sizing, because she works on a percentage method based on the full bust, which doesn't work on the ends of the size chart for the really small busted and the very large busted. So you will have to accommodate for that if you are knitting a sweater for yourself and you are in one of those, not in the center of the size chart. Um, but she does talk at length about all the different, takes you through the history of sweater design from the very beginning, basic blouse to the ganzis to all the traditional sweater, saddle shaped, raglan, full yoke, shoulder yoke, and with all the different, the history behind where all these shapes came from. This is a good history book, but it's also a good way to understand how people came up with the construction and knit these sweaters without ever having a pattern. How did they do it with this
Right.
and still get it to fit in a particular way for everyone? So it's a fantastic book. If you can get a hold of a copy of that, it's worthwhile reading. We had couple other, do we have any more questions? Because I can't see my comments on this phone.
No,
Christina?
there's been no more questions. No. Do you have
Okay,
any more that
so
we got?
yes, we did. Jessica McDonald asked, what about scaling? Whoops, hold on. Let me back up here. Uh, What about scaling the design for larger and smaller sizes? This is something that bugs me. I make a yoke chart to fill the smallest yoke, but then the larger sizes will have inches of blank yoke. What is your opinion on this? So if we're talking about, let's say, a top-down yoked sweater that has a large motif or even a motif on the yoke, what is your opinion, Christina, about scaling that motif for the sizes? What do you
Well,
think?
so it's tricky, right? Like I've seen it a few different ways. Some people will change the motif by size, and every size will have, or every few sizes will have a different, it won't be the exact same. It'll be altered for each size to fill that space in the same way that you would do for um, a stitch pattern on a collar or a
Mhm.
sleeve. You'd alter that stitch pattern to accommodate sizing changes. So that's one way to
Or
do
like
it,
a cable across the front.
right? Or like a brioche pattern or something that you could change over sizes, or you could center it in a different place, and maybe the people in different
Yeah.
sizes
Hmm.
would work that motif at a different time. You can't really get away from the fact that in a yoked sweater, in smaller sizes, you're going to work fewer rows than you are in a larger size. Um, but you can either change that motif per size, or you can center it in a different place so that you don't
Hmm.
have, it doesn't look awkward. What do you think,
Right.
Sarah?
I think this is a tricky part about sweater design, period. And a lot in the past, a lot of designers have given the excuse that the motif that they've chosen doesn't work at the other sizes. So then they use that as an excuse to not have a larger range of sizes in a sweater pattern. So this is a way to solve a problem, is to scale it if you feel like that is and looks appropriate. Um, or you can center it. That's what I've done when I've graded out designs with a yoke sweater. I basically center the motif so that it's in the same place
For
from the
every size.
shoulders on for every size, the same
Hmm.
distance from in the center of the armhole depth or the yoke depth. And that seems to work okay with some things. I think you have to decide what works best for your design. And one of the designs I graded out, I added more cable. Well, you add more. In other words, if you have a larger girth as the sizes increase, then you can add more patterning so that it looks so that the same plain amount is the same plain stockinette part is the same across sizes.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways to accomplish this with the
Mhm.
understanding that your knitters realize that the largest and the smallest sizes may not look exactly like the sample.
Well,
Um,
and I hate to say this, but really the best thing to do to decide how you want to handle that in your particular design is to swatch a little bit of it in the size you're concerned about, and
mhm,
see what you think, and see how you think you can make it work so that you are still happy with the look of it,
mhm.
as compared to other sizes, right? Because there
Yeah.
are a couple ways to handle it. You can center it in the same place so it's, ratio the same across sizes, or you can alter that motif to fit the space for each size. So we have a comment. I have
And
9 different charts for my sizes for the sweater I'm working on. It was a lot
wow.
of work, but the design is more consistent. I I hear you. I mean, there are some
Oh, wow.
um, people
That's
that
impressive work.
do that. There's a like chart out every size, and sometimes it is possible to make that chart one chart, right? and just have certain parts of the chart worked for each, whatever the size is. So you don't always have to make separate charts. Sometimes you can get a little creative with the chart and find a way to keep just
Right.
one chart, but only certain parts of it are worked. But that doesn't always work depending on how you're altering the motif. So wow, 9 different charts. Yeah.
So I have seen some designers, if there is a motif that takes up the entire yoke in the sample size, then they will add more rows to accommodate for the larger sizes. So then the larger sizes actually get more of the motif. So it just depends on
Right.
your design. And so then depending on what size you are, depends on where you start in the chart and where you end. So there is only one size chart, or one charted motif, but it will look different according to your size. The one thing I would just caution you is don't use this conundrum as an excuse not to offer certain sizes, because I have
Right.
seen that happen in the past, and I think it's kind of an easy way out to not address it. Do
Mm-hmm.
find a way to make it work for you in your design, in your design intention, because there's usually a way to make it work and work well across sizes, even if some of the sizes don't look exactly like the sample. Hopefully that answered your question, Jessica.
I
Um,
agree.
then we did have a response to that. Bad Betty Knits, which is Mari, asked, I'd also be curious if tech editors advise designers to double up raglan increases at the end in larger sizes to avoid making the yoke too deep. I think it's relatively common adjustment for larger knitters, but haven't seen it used in patterns much. As someone who grades raglan sweaters, I would say that raglans are one of the trickiest things to write to fit all body sizes because you're dealing with a line where usually there's every other round, and it goes a short distance. Um, so I think that there are many ways to accomplish this fit. One thing I recommend that if
Oh,
you're
you're breaking up.
okay, so you talk.
So she is saying that people often have to double up increases at the bottom of the raglan is what she's saying. And why is that not incorporated in designs? So she's asking, you were kind of breaking up. I couldn't really understand what she was asking. Is that what she's saying? Why is that
She's
not
saying
incorporated?
that why isn't it offered in
Yeah. And it's like
more
what Sarah
sweater
was starting to
pattern?
say. Raglans are really difficult to design and get right in all the places because you're working with that diagonal line and getting the bicep measurement and the bust measurement achieved at the same time. So I think what needs to happen, and I'm hoping this is going to get better in pattern design and that designers pay a little more attention to this. You need to get creative in your grading and find ways to maintain that raglan line while also getting the increases where they need to be in the correct amount of distance. You want to have
Mm-hmm.
enough room for the bust and enough room for the arm without having way too much room for the arm, or
Mm-hmm.
and but then the bust is achieved, right? And there are ways in the raglan where you can do increases for the arm sometimes, and where the arm and the
Mm-hmm.
bust both sometimes, and the bust just sometimes and not the arm. And that's where you really need to look at those size charts. And I do hope this gets addressed by more people. Raglans are tricky because of that, and I feel bad that people have to make such large accommodations, not accommodations, adjustments, when they're knitting a sweater.
Right.
But you do sometimes have to. Um, you can double up. You can double up increases if you need to, and designers should be addressing that and doing that.
Doubling up
Are
increases
you there,
mean
Sarah?
I am. Is it still breaking up? um, The doubling up increases means that you do it every round or every round.
Right.
Sometimes use knit 3 together instead of knit 2 together to accomplish more, or sorry, that would be decreases, like knit front back, and to, if you're going top down, it depends which direction you're going on the raglan, if it's bottom up or top down. The other thing to look into is compound raglan, which allows, like what we first shared in Maggie Righetti's book, it allows for a certain amount of shaping, and it allows a lot more points for doing increases on every round, or decreases on every round, depending on which direction you're going.
Right.
So hopefully we answered everybody's questions. Do you guys have any more for us before we let you go for this week? We love being here and talking to you guys.
We do.
Sorry
I
I'm
love
breaking
doing.
up.
Yeah, we're kind of losing you, but I hope we addressed that question well enough. You totally, that is something that can be done, and that is something that can be written into patterns by the designer to achieve what needs to happen. And you really just, need to pay attention to the ratios between those parts. I would like to say one more thing about resources. There are also a lot of online resources that we like and that we use, and Sarah has done a very good job of compiling them. Okay, so on her website, you can find a resources page where a lot of information is listed about not just sweaters, but other things too. And also in her highlights on her Instagram profile page, there's, I think it's sizing or something. There's a grading maybe. There's a highlight with lots of resources about sweater design that I would recommend you check out. Also, I wanted to say that Jackie C. Slack, her on Instagram is Jacqueline C. Slack. I would suggest you follow her newsletter because she did a sizing survey that is now closed, but she's compiling the results of that. And in that, what I'm excited about it for is because in that survey, what she's doing, compiling this information, is talking about and examining the ratios between the points on the body, which do not change in the same way across sizes. They are different. And a lot of the trouble in design and how things get done is that people think those ratios from in between points are the same for every size, and they're not. So I think that when she does put that information together, it's going to be really valuable. So I would follow her newsletter.
So that's Jackie C. Slack, or Jacqueline C. Slack.
Right. She
Nadia
says, do you
Lewis,
guys have a favorite sweater style?
what do you think, Christina?
Dude, I like a set in sleeves. Seamless for me. That's what I
Same with
like.
me.
I like
I'm there
editing
with
them
you.
and I like knitting them.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I love a set in sleeve. I don't particularly like sewing them in. I like to reserve my sewing for fabrics at my sewing machine.
I like to never sew, ever.
I really do like seamless designs. So what I like, a seamless set-in sleeve allows me to have the same kind of structure as a seam, but yields the same shaping of a set-in sleeve, which is my favorite shape for a sweater.
Put that in.
C-slack, how do you spell it?
I'm going to type it in.
Okay, she's going to type it in for you. What was the other question we have here? Am I stopped breaking up yet?
You're a little better.
Okay, Victoria's Wool. How could designers include back shoulder distance? How would a knitter choose a size based on her bust and shoulder? I've not designed a sweater, but often want to know what the shoulders in designers are. So it wouldn't be difficult. A knitter can measure from one bone to the other bone on their front if you want to use that as the basis for choosing a size. This is very common also to around using measuring tape around the armpit area, like from their armpit level.
The upper bust, right under your armpit.
Which is what we call the upper bust.
I would recommend that, I think, Victoria, because asking a knitter to get their cross front measurement from shoulder point to shoulder point is one thing. But what you're going to also need is that cross back measurement, and it's nearly impossible to get correctly. Okay.
On yourself.
And people just, that measurement eludes everybody. So I think going with the upper bust, where you put that tape measure, like Sarah said, right under your armpit
Like right
and
here.
wrap it around your body, get the circumference around the upper bust, is a really good way to go to think about getting that shoulder right.
Hmm.
I think. And the crossback measurement is helpful in the sizing charts and um, to make sure you're on track for designing it. But I think that having knitters depend on getting that measurement correct to size the pattern for themselves is, I think, always going to fail. It's just a tough measurement to get. What do you think, Sarah?
I agree. It's very hard to measure your own body. Um, you can make a lot of mistakes measuring your own body and then get errant measurements that would cause you to choose a wrong size. I do think it would be great if we can move away from a full bust measurement as far as sizing, being the sizing indicator. I would love
Mm,
to see sizing go to something different, more like a torso size, which would be more inclusive for people maybe who don't have large breasts or don't have breasts at all. So then you could add cup size for sweaters. But that, I think that would be way down the line. I don't think we're
mm,
there yet for sizing. Most sizing is now based on full bust, which doesn't always lend itself to great fit. So I'm excited to see where Jackie takes this as far as the measurements for using the upper bust too. So I think we all should keep our eyes on her designs.
yeah, I do.
So that's just my input. I'm exploring different ways of looking at sizing um, as far as what is the indicator, what's the crux one that we refer to for sizing. I hope it isn't always going to be full bust because a woman, well, a woman in general, we may have a certain torso size, which is this upper bust measurement, but our bust size, like the amount of breast tissue we have, can vary widely. So in other
Right.
words, you can have a very small torso size and narrow shoulders, but then have a large bust size. So then if you always choose your sweater sizes according to the bust size, then it may not fit up in the shoulder. And this is what I see a
Right.
lot of my sweater students complain about who have a fuller bust. So they have, D, triple E, F size bra, and their sweaters never fit here. So I would like to see sizing move towards aiming at shoulder width or upper bust or upper chest measurements and then adding cup sizes, but that's a lot more work as far
Right.
as designers go. And you have to have a lot of experience doing that, and I don't know. It may take a while for us to get there. But that would be my hope.
Yeah. I think
So,
a good first step is understanding that it's an issue and understanding the ratios between that. And once you realize what a difference
hmm
it can make in the fit of the shoulders, and, I'm hoping
hmm
that will, empower people to make changes in how they think about it.
Thank you for joining us today. We really enjoyed having you. I'm probably breaking up, so Christina, take us out.
Thank you very much. We are going to be back next Monday at 11 Eastern. If you have any questions in the meantime, we're going to,
hmm
I don't think we're exactly solid what exact aspect we're talking about. We probably will. I don't know if we're solid. Are we solid? I don't know if we know.
Size
But
chart.
sizing, okay. Size charts, sizing.
Size chart.
So if you have any questions about sizing or about anything else, about sweater
hmm
design or anything, send us a message or a comment on our posts. And see you next week at 11.
Bye, everybody. Have a great
Thanks,
week.
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.